Great. Good morning, everyone. I'm Craig Schinn. I'm new to the email world, first-time insider. I have the privilege of getting to moderate this panel and learn a little bit more about things that are really important to my job. The Clymb is a flash sale site that is dedicated to the outdoor industry. I lead customer acquisition, so acquiring new emails, and manage the daily send to 1.2 million active subscribers. So content is a critical area for us to break through. As a members-only flash sale site, email is our main sales tool. And so I have this privilege of learning from minds who are much more experienced in this area than me. And that said, I'd love for everyone to introduce themselves and kind of give tell us about a case study that you're particularly proud of in your role right now.
Introduce and case study?
Please.
Okay, all right. So I'm Roger Fwazzi. I'm from Carnival down in Miami. Case study, I would say that it is geo-targeting is what we're kind of hot on right now, and it's something that, so we've got a lot of targeted DM offers that are going out, but in email we tended to be batch and blast, and we'll get into more of that later, but more, sales for the masses type of thing. So I would say it's geo-targeting, and it's based on your home location and zip code.
Hi, I'm Erin Zhang. I'm manager of our digital team at Mutual of Omaha, and so it's insurance, banking, financial products is what we deal with. Not the most glamorous thing in the world, but we get to have fun every now and then with incentive contests for our producers. So try and encourage them to sell more insurance, and they get these fabulous trips, which I never get to go on. But one that's kind of fun, it's the best case study that won't bore you, was a trip to Prague last year that the more they sell, they qualify, and we kind of like to make it competitive because they're very competitive in nature. But this one was, since it was in Prague and Mission Impossible was filmed there, we made it the Mission Possible campaign. And it kind of broke out of the normal shell template where it's just a picture of a beautiful city and what you're going to do there and stuff like that, where it was more in spy theme, and it had blacked out copy even and things like that. So it got great response rates, and I heard it was a great trip.
I'm Alana Rabinowitz. I'm VP of Marketing at Lion Brand Yarn Company, and we sell yarn. That's hand knitting yarn. We've learned a lot. We do a lot of social media, so we do blogging and Facebook, Twitter, and we've learned a lot from those platforms about what people respond to. So when we see something go crazy on the blog or on Facebook, we learn from that and put it in our email. So, and you never really know until you accidentally discover this. So someone wrote a blog post about how to crochet a button, and everybody loved it. So we put that into an email. And if someone wrote a blog post that was very pinnable on Pinterest about how-to content, which is something our customers love, we can focus on that in an email. So we test it in these other platforms and roll it out on email.
Great. Hi, everybody. I'm Wakara Yeomans. I'm the Director of Creative Services at Responsys, and I manage the design, copywriting, and web development teams there in Seattle, San Francisco, Chicago, and New York. And the case study that I was going to talk about today when we were talking about breakout content, I really think it's important to think about the concept behind the content that you're creating and how you're solving a problem by using a really interesting way of highlighting that problem for a customer. So we did a project with Orbitz recently where they were looking to sell hotels, and since it's a travel-themed day, I can contribute some more. And we did this test for them where we did the regular, hey, you're going home for the holidays, where are you going to stay? Are you going to, so normally you get a list of hotels that are near the places that you've traveled in the past. But this year we did a take where it was like, what are your options? Do you want to sleep in the bed with your niece? Do you want to couch surf for 2 days? Or would you rather stay at a great hotel 2 blocks from your parents' house? And it performed wildly well. Just giving that context and putting more of the user's experience and the benefits to them really helped that campaign perform super well.
Cool. So these are our panelists. Again, privileged to be a part of it. There's 3 areas where we're going to touch on today. First is around content strategy. The second area that we're going to dive into a bit is personalization. And lastly, the importance of testing within content. So I'm going to try to keep this to either statements which the panelists can agree or disagree with, or pose them as questions. We have a few prepared, and then if anyone in the audience wants to contribute, feel free. So the first one is, an editorial calendar is not a content strategy. Right? So Wakara, let me hand that over to you.
Sure. I mean, I do think that planning your content is an important step in your marketing program, but it doesn't actually solve the problem of how are you communicating to your customer and how are you talking to your segments in a way that lets them understand that you know who they are as an individual. And that requires a totally different method and process, and the editorial calendar should be the manifestation of your content strategy.
And I think one of the things that drives our content strategy is our mission. So we go back to our mission statement, which is we educate and inspire yarn crafters to help elevate their experience. So if our content isn't doing that, if we're not teaching someone something, if we're not inspiring them with a free pattern, then our content doesn't fit our mission, and it sort of keeps us on brand. Obviously, this isn't about, we take a kind of a two-step process, which is we go first for the interesting content and then tie it to something that they buy. So our content is rarely a product, and when products are the content of email, it's something that we kind of expect our readers to tolerate, which I thought was a great concept presented on day one, which is tolerance. You kind of give them all this good stuff and they'll tolerate you selling to them.
So Aaron, I would just, as an e-commerce retailer, it's pretty easy for us to have a content strategy. It's around the products that we have to sell that day and a flash sale. With a product that's less tangible, how do you handle the editorial calendar versus content strategy, and how do you break that across?
It's interesting you asked that, because in my head I was just thinking, we're very siloed in our products. We're a very product-focused company, and those product people want their product, and they don't want to hear what anyone else is doing. So they all have their editorial calendars of what they want to send, but they don't think of the actual user, so the producer that's receiving it, and do they really want to get a life, a long-term care, email on the same day. So we have to kind of challenge them to think, well, we already have this going out, and go that way. And content strategy is a huge hot button for website, email, everything at my company right now. We've actually engaged a strategist company to help us with that. Because it's something they definitely struggle with, and I'm not in charge of the content, but I have lots of opinions on it. So we like to give them opinions on what we've seen with the best practices. And I think the problem with the editorial calendar is we see what's working, and the marketers do as well, but the product doesn't want to necessarily change what they had on their calendar. And it's like, well, you kind of have to adapt and change because this wasn't working, but this was, so let's do more of this.
Roger, tell us about Carnival Cruise Lines and content strategy there.
Well, it's interesting. I was thinking about where the content strategy originates, and a lot of times in the past it's been with our revenue management team. So it's been, here's a list of sales, go out and publish these. Now what we tend to do is look at what the brand overall is doing. So it's like not only keeping to the brand voice, but so what are the big happening events? Like we have a ship that just came out of transformation, and it's sailing this Sunday, the Sunshine. That's a huge event. So tying those things in, but also like housing the sales within these other newsletters or product launches or other types of interesting emails. And then the net is that we still convert at the same rate. It's just people are able to pick and choose other topics that they find interesting.
So a point Alana highlighted was around tying things to a company mission. And it seems to me that Carnival certainly has a well-known brand. How does your content tie into the company mission?
Well, that's a great question. I think that it's more, we tie in more to the brand and the experience than we are thinking about a mission statement per se. And so I think, and that was touched on earlier with the Palms casinos, where we want, if you open a DM piece or an email piece or go to a landing page and it looks very different from your experience on board, that's not a great thing. Because when people come back from their trips, they're super excited, they're ecstatic about the great time they had, they're all over Facebook about it, so that's what we try to tie back to all the time, is like making sure that that brand voice is there.
Alana, do you have something to layer on to that, since it was your theme initially?
Yeah, no, I think that's a very good point, that the experience is, a very sensible driver, especially if you can tie it to, it's really nice to bring in customer comments about the experience into the email.
One thing I wanted to add to it too, though, if we think about customers, they purchase emotionally. Like, people don't make decisions to buy things logically. It's usually an emotional response to something that we've done to elicit that behavior from them. So your brand becomes a way of giving them a positive experience, just a customer experience, right? So your content becomes a big part of telling your brand story to your customer so that it inspires them to take action with your brand instead of the other brands that are out there. And I really think it's important for marketers to understand, even though we own email, branding is a huge part of our conversation and a part about how we frame up our content and give it a place to live, because that's what the customers are expecting to talk to us like. And like we were talking about before, you're a brand first and a channel second. So whichever experience they have on your web, they expect to have that in your email. If they have that experience in your store, you want to bring that onto your email too. And that becomes a huge place that I think we need to think about.
So I'll provide an example of a time during my tenure, short 3.5-month tenure with the Climb. The Climb's corporate mission is to inspire human-powered outdoor adventure, right? And for the most part, our sales are aligned to either the brands that we're carrying on a given day, or a specific category, like backcountry skier, the lightweight backpacker. There was one day where we tried something a little bit different, something that was a little bit off-brand for us, and we had some very positive results, but some other areas that were concerning. So for any of you guys who are on the Climb's mailing, I'm sure there's some in the room. I've already heard from a couple people who are like, oh yeah, I bought from you guys. About a month ago, we did a sale called Zombie Survival Gear, and very different than our normal sort of sales. We packaged up a lot of camp axes, utility knives, sleeping bags and tents. Actually, a bunch of backcountry food and stoves. The idea being that if the country were taken over by zombies, that you would still have things to live by. It actually was breakout content in regard to that email, generated open rates which were much above our normal open rates. We use a statistical process control to tell when there's unexplained variation in our open and click rates, and it exceeded in both, and that was very unusual for us. But we also noticed that there was a lot of deletes of our email that day and a lot of unsubscribes that day. So, in a sense, we departed and saw these really positive results. We created this sale that did have some buzz to it. But there was a consequence from stepping outside of what our content strategy and corporate mission are. I'm wondering if you guys have examples from your work where you might have had a similar experience, or maybe paid the price for going off-brand.
We actually have a zombie experience as well.
This thing is real, guys.
Our Twitter followers, for example, are very into zombies. You can talk about anything edgy or crazy or zombie stuffed dolls or anything you want on Twitter. But if you would mention that on Facebook, which is a totally different demographic, you'll get flamed on Facebook. So we know that our email newsletter is much more generic. They're more like our Facebook customers. So we are really careful about the particular channel we're talking on, to know who's there and to know that you can or cannot talk about a topic like zombies.
Yeah, we got flamed a little on Facebook that day.
Yeah. That's where you'll hear. Yeah.
I actually am pretty lucky, because we're I guess lucky and not so lucky, because we're heavily regulated. It's a conservative company, and I'm actually part of the brand division, a larger division, so we're the brand police. So we don't allow things to go out the door like that, and we don't take as many risks, I guess, in that arena, but we also struggle with that, because we want to see if some of that more fun stuff would work. especially with our customers.
Any other examples?
I have kind of an example, though, of content planning gone wrong, I guess. If I think about, so there's quite a few retailers that I've worked with in my history, and one of the things that I've noticed when we looked at poor performance of campaign, we tracked it back to ugly creative, which I will admit came out of my shop, but we looked back even another step and looked at a very sloppy brief that gave really poor direction and tried to put 4 messages in the primary, right? And so if there's a primary message, there should be one primary message. But that really started to resonate with their end customers because there was just this jumbled mess and they didn't really understand what it was that we were asking them to do. And so I know that that's been a really big lesson that I've carried, and when I talk to my clients about, you know, we really need to think about optimizing your message so that it's super easy for someone to understand what you want them to do. And again, give that same emotional feeling about your brand with the content that you're sharing with them.
Cool. So let's transition gears a bit to personalization. And, you know, it's something, you know, this industry has kind of, you know, trumpeted personalization for some time. And it strikes me from some of the examples that we've talked about, we're doing personalization in kind of small ways for most of us in the room. I'd like for each of you to share a tangible example of personalized content that you worked on that you're especially proud of. We'll start with you, Roger.
Okay. Well, so I was with TripAdvisor previously, and personalization is huge there, and we keep hearing about, you know, tell me about people like me. And so TripAdvisor is definitely moving in that direction. We were able to bring in your Facebook Connect, so by introducing an app on Facebook where you can pin your places that you've traveled, but then you can also bring in your friends' information. So where are they reviewing currently? Where have they been? But one of the things that I really loved working on was how many pins does your friend have? And then it's like this competition thing. Like, are you kidding me? I know that they don't have more than me, so I go on and pin 20 more places. So I think that that was really successful. We put that in our newsletters, and you'll still see it from time to time, and even some of their just purely promotional emails.
I've got to think about a way to do that with my campaign. I was super jealous of the IGN example where they gamified email. That's got to really help inbox deliverability.
So on the B2B side, we're doing it small scale as well, but I think it's in a relevant way where I have 2 examples. One being another incentive trip where, because they're competitive, actually we don't put the name of who's in the lead, but putting their actual production scores on there and then where you're at. Or if you've qualified, we send you a qualifier content versus you're almost there, this is what you got to do, these people are already here type of thing, to create that competition. And then also don't make them log in to go see, because some of that's not a privacy concern. So what's not, we don't make them log in to go get that, just show it up front. And then another on the other side of, one of the other sides of our house, where we sell it to employers, not necessarily individuals, personalizing, they go from a wholesaler to a broker, so personalizing the email so it's not from a national sales director. So there'll be 30 different wholesalers that they know more, they deal with on a more regular basis. So we personalize the email from them and use the variables that way.
How is the open rate, click-through rate? How are your success metrics different when you do that?
Night and day different, because if you don't know the person, you're not even going to open it. So I don't have specific percentages, but I know they were a lot better, which is why they want to continue to do it with other departments as well.
Lana, how about you?
So we're starting to see some results from a campaign that's going to result in something that has become a curse word here, so I'm going to say it. Surprise and delight. And what we're doing is we've had a newsletter that's around for over 10 years, so we're going to recognize people for the amount of time they've been subscribed to the newsletter and offer them something related to the amount of time they've been subscribed. So people aren't going to be expecting this. Really, if you've been subscribed for 10 years, you're going to get something very special. It sort of came home to me when I once called my credit card, and they said, oh, you know, thank you for being a valued customer for 16 years. And it hit me. I was like, wow, I can't believe that, you know. Now I can't leave them. We've been together too long. I mean, it kind of is like a loyalty
Breaking
thing.
up is hard.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would think too, I mean, when you talk about brand loyalty, it really is a relationship in that same way that, you know, as a marketer, you also have to kind of keep it sexy too. Like if you've been a customer for 7 years, you need to have new ways to keep them engaged and keep them coming back and talking to them as an individual. And I think that there's a lot of cool ways that, you know, with new technologies that are out there with, you know, video and email and things that Movable Ink is doing is ways to really kind of spice up the inbox for people that are used to receiving great content from your brand on a regular basis. And I'm going to be a little bit of a difficult panelist here, but I do have a question about, you know, as we start talking about talking to our customers on a one-to-one level, how realistic is that for every campaign? Because when I think about, you know, a customer, like for example, Erin, right? Erin is a woman, she's also in the Midwest, also a mom. So she's a part of these little pods of communities, but when I put together the right combination of pods, it feels like I'm talking to her as an individual, but really I'm looking at a lot of different segments at the same time and prioritizing which is she more. Is she more Midwest, or is it more important that she, you know, she's a mom? So that's kind of the part that I think, I don't know if you guys have ideas around how you've solved for that.
I really like that philosophy too, because we think personalization is all about like greeting you by your first name, which sometimes works and sometimes it's like, yeah, everybody's doing that. But there are groups in thinking of what people like to talk about, and they love to talk about the weather and what's going on locally. So we had, at a company I worked for, Sahali out in Portland, we had anticipated some of the events that might happen weather-wise, and so it was like
Rain.
No, but this was so what we also happened to like you sell outdoor gear. So we had a template set up, and it was the blizzard template. And so the minute that you know, we saw a front moving in, there was just going to be like just huge amounts of snow, we would deploy to that region our blizzard template, and it was all about staying inside, and here's the great, you know, the best fleece, and here's like your survival gear, not for zombies, but you know, for outdoors, and it worked really, really well. So that was, and I see that over and over. Like I just recently, I really admired this little burrito shop in Boston called Boloco, and I'm from Boston, so you know. But during the Nemo storm, they sent out these really cool, like up to the minute kind of weather updates. But it was all about like, come on in and have a great burrito, or you know, the tea is closing, so on your way home, make sure you're stocked up with burritos. And so it was really, really good. But so personalization can sometimes be like, to Wakara's point, to groups and locales and regions, and that works really well.
Yeah, I actually, in my prior life, I was display guy. Most recently I was at RTB, a startup in the real-time bidded media industry, and we found weather to be hugely predictive for one of our online food delivery clients. And you know, to know that it was raining, people, surprise, surprise, didn't want to walk out to a restaurant. They wanted to have somebody deliver it to them, and we took advantage of that in our display campaigns, and I could see it having a big impact on email.
I think the key to personalization, from what I've seen, and more as a consumer receiving emails, I like when it's the groups and it's relevant to me, so it's all about relevance. But then sometimes they cross that line and get into the creepy factor. And that's where I like it when a brand gets me and provides me that, but I don't want them to know me too well. You know what I mean? So I think there is a fine line.
Well, I agree. I think sometimes when the brand becomes your stalker, that's like not great. So, or sometimes when like you really have broken up and you really need to move on. But like, so one of the travel sites, I think I visited their site and planned a trip to Mexico or whatever. And then they like married me to Mexico for the following 2 years, even though I had sort of moved on. And you know, so I think that it can go wrong, and you need to be able to transition to what is current in their lives and what they're looking for.
I would also also add that personalization is helpful when you're giving them a service, and it's, I know this about you, and I know you're going to want this thing, and I'm trying to help you, and less about, hey, you know, Joe, I know that, you know, you're sitting at your desk right now. Like that part is where I think we need to be careful. But like Google Now just recently came out, and it's been funny to see how people have responded to it, because it really is looking at all of your search history and everything that's on your phone and giving you live recommendations based on, it sent me like my 4 favorite restaurants next to my apartment, and at first it really kind of creeped me out, but I was like, well, those are the ones I would go to if I was looking for dinner right now. So it made me a little bit more comfortable with it, but it's still kind of a jarring experience, I think, for consumers, and they're getting more used to this, but they're not quite there.
So personalization, in my role, it seems like a great idea. We've done some pilots where we'll take, you know, people have purchased cycling gear and apparel from us before, and we'll make sure that they get cycling events higher in the email, versus people who have purchased footwear, maybe get a footwear, an event is a sale for us. They get a footwear event higher in the email. And we've seen really, really positive results to that, 20% differences in event click-throughs, but it seems really hard. And when I talk about it with my creative team, they really are like, how many more people are we going to need? We're going to have to create all these extra images. You know, as in each of your roles, how often are you fighting that battle, and what are ways to kind of work around that very practical step toward personalization?
Well, in our case, we were using actually 3 different creative agencies for email, and so when I joined, that was the first of all, it was producing, like, you know, very sporadic messaging, and the brand was just off. So we brought the creative in-house, and now when we look at the content of a piece, we try to identify simple variables that we could insert personalization. So it may be based on, one thing we do is, like, you would get a different offer than someone who maybe has never cruised, or someone who's cruised like 15 times. So that's one way. But then also we bring in, like, your loyalty levels. So, you know, what tier have you reached and where are you going next, that type of thing. So it's, for me, it's identifying the variables, keeping it really, really simple. And then sometimes the default is just your control to the groups who you don't have the personalization data, so.
Well, we have no choice but to keep it simple. We have a small team. We do everything in-house, and so we pick and choose what's the low-hanging fruit here. What are the good questions we can ask about our database that we think is going to make a big difference? And we set it up ourselves, we pull the data ourselves, we do the creative. So, you know, it's a different story for someone who's got lots of resources. It's probably a much more challenging and scary story, but I think we just, you know, choose what's going to give us the biggest bang for our buck and go for that.
Yeah, I would add that I get asked this question a lot because, you know, the question I really get is, hey, I want to do all this personalization, but how do I not kill my creative team? And I think that it's important to, again, prioritize. Like, where are the areas where you can get that brand impression or that lift that requires design, and then what are things that you can rely on machines to produce instead of humans? And I would think about, you know, using your humans to do the more strategic and beautiful things, and look at ways that you can automate the other things, right? Because most retailers that I work with, we still right-click the product image from their website, put it in a Photoshop file, send it to someone who HTMLs it, sends it to someone who puts it in the product and hooks up all the data. Like, that is still a very human process, and I think we need to start thinking about infrastructures that could allow you to scale and look at automating a lot of those systems so that you use your human hours for thoughtful things.
And I think the challenge we face, we do have a lean team as well. We do play a lot of roles on our team, but it's also then the marketers and the people that write the content want to test every variable, and they want to see all 100 versions or whatever, which we're trying to train them. You have to trust the data, and it'll work. You can test a few. So that's our challenge right now. So that's why we're going the small route and showing them success, and then try and go bigger.
I was really surprised yesterday with that statistic. I don't know if you guys remember seeing Best Buy 20 million emails a month with 18 million different versions. I was like, well, there would be no way to understand how each one did. You almost have to trust personalized versus not personalized. Mm-hmm. So let's move on to the importance of testing within our content. Tell us about your procedure of, like, how does testing influence the content that you put forward?
I'll jump in. So this is kind of on the website and email side. We do some A/B tests. Timing often doesn't allow that, I guess. So we've been doing a lot more on the website with usability tests and simple things, which does translate to email, just like with photos and things like that, and asking questions. And our team gets sick of, since we don't have a product that we can show, a box to buy life insurance or anything like that with Snoopy on it, we have to go with a happy family or smiling person, that type of thing. But we were sick of finding those photos. So we've tried different things with our bank, especially with their rebrand going on. It was maybe shoes or something, to the idea that it's kids or things like that, kind of the more abstract. But people prefer the smiling, happy people. So if you have a house for mortgage insurance, they want the people in front of it. They just don't want the house, things like that. So we've done some testing around that. And the good and bad of it is I was wrong. I thought people didn't want that happy, smiling people, but they do. And we tested it, so it's not just someone's opinion.
Yeah, we've also discovered that putting people in images makes a big difference. So if we're showing a baby sweater and it's on a beautiful background and laid out very nicely, it's very much less impactful than when you see a cute little baby face. So I think this goes to Kara's point of people buying based on emotional drivers, and human beings drive emotion much more than simple, plain products.
Yeah, I mean, I think I have a lot of examples, too, of tests where we do find that having humans in your emails almost always helps, just because they can identify with that person, and they're like, I'm going to be happy like that couple in front of that house if I buy this insurance. And it's subconscious, but it happens. And I think, thinking about what parts of your products need that kind of inspiration behind them, and especially if you're doing something like, Harley Davidson is a client of ours, and that's a really long purchase, and nobody buys a motorcycle from an email. But it's the email's job to inspire you and to help you see that product in your life, and to go back to the fundamentals of marketing and focus on the benefits and not on the features of the product. Like, you don't buy a bike because the wheels are 18 inches tall. You buy a bike because you imagine yourself riding your hog down the highway, and that's what you have to do with your content and how you bring that in. And so we've done a lot of testing with that too, because women Harley riders are looking for very different types of images versus male Harley riders, and there's a lot of work there at making that emotional connection, and you have to test regularly to find out what resonates with that audience.
Good examples, thanks. I'd want to get specific on another piece of the email, which is arguably the most important piece, the subject line. Now, all of us work in different industries and are going to have different kind of hot button words. What are the words that, through testing, specific words that you found really lift open and click rates?
Well,
I'll share some of mine too.
This is probably not a big surprise, but the word free. So we sell yarn, but we offer free patterns, which inspires people and drives them to buy. So free patterns in the subject line, the more the better. 15 works better than 7. It's kind of like you learn this after a while, and it's very, very predictable. And the other thing that works well is 3 days left, or it's some kind of time crunch. So talking to the other, there was a presentation on what drives behavior, and that's one of the things: scarcity, time sensitiveness, and free stuff.
I think too, maybe it's not telling the whole story. So a lot of times, especially in travel, like, you can lead in with a question, or one of our successful subject lines was just simple, where to next, question mark, dot, dot, dot. So it's like leading into the story, sometimes letting the pre-header give a little bit more of the teaser. And sometimes what we do too is test pre-header as subject line versus subject line with that same pre-header, and we've been able to identify words or keyword groupings that work really well, and then it's reuse those. And the nice thing in a pre-header is that you can assign a link to those word groupings, and you'll see if people are reacting to that link as well.
And I think the time stuff works for us as well if it's relevant to what we're talking about. For our producers, the product we're talking about works really well, which shouldn't be a surprise. But then also just with testing, watching the trends of seeing what people are opening on or even clicking on in the emails, and then putting that up and testing that in the subject line has really worked well for us.
One of the things that I've seen one of my clients be successful with is tying their subject lines to their organic search terms. So looking at what are the terms that people have that resonate with your brand anyway. So if they're going to search for, blank insurance, and how do they actually get to your brand over the others? And that can help you start to think about their mentality and what they're thinking about when they look in the inbox and are trying to decide whether or not to open. But I know that we've seen, similar to other folks too, that numbers do really well. Definitely shorter subject lines are in right now. There's also lots of info on symbols and subject lines too, which have been all over the place. And I think I've seen a lot of people find kind of short-term lifts with those, but haven't really seen anybody that has like long-term sustained increase in opens. But it does work as a onesie-twosie to really make an impact.
So I'll share my words. Since we're very much brand driven as an e-tailer, our open rates and click rates kind of fluctuate with what brands we run. We have a brand called Innovate. I don't know if any of you guys do CrossFit or like mud races, but this shoe is has a cult following, and we apparently have a lot of this cult on our list. We run Innovate, and it spikes our open rates. It's INOV8. We also find specific discounts on sales. We recently ran one where we ran a sale, and oftentimes you'll see retailers save up to 60%. Or save up to 90%. Well, we had done that, and occasionally we put a handful of items that were, 90%, and then a lot of other stuff that was at a much lower discount to kind of manage margin. Well, we recently did a blowout sale. We did 60 to 90%. There was literally not one item in that sale that was below a 60% discount. That one was way off the charts. And being a flash sale site, we have that advantage of being time bound. So to the presentation earlier today, having time bound, if we say 8 hours left, 1 day left to save, those things work much better than end soon. And we find we drive much more sales when we use those words.
You know what, too, Craig, is thinking about words that are inclusive. So sometimes the up to, it's people immediately are thinking, to your point, yeah, there's going to be two things in that category. But saying site-wide or 50% off everything or every cruise or every vacation, those work really well.
I'll add one more thing too. I think it's important to balance when you have off-sale messaging with your regular brand messaging, because your subject line is also working as an impression in the inbox, that they're getting reminders of your brand. So I would also make sure that you're balancing your discounts off and things like that, because some people don't have the advantage of having discounts and all of their products are full price. So it's important that you're using words that really resonate, again, emotionally with your customers, so that even if they don't open your email, it's still creating a positive brand impression for them each time that they see your name pop up in their inbox.
I have a funny example. This is an accident, but it really worked. We have a life newsletter, I think it was, and it had the same subject line by accident the next month that it went out. Someone forgot to change it, or something happened, they used the wrong one. So it was the same one as the previous month, and it had the highest open rate. It was higher than the last month. I don't know if people thought they were going to get more on that topic or what the deal was, but it outperformed the other months.
Wow. So I know that we're running a little low on time here, so I'm going to jump to our what I intended to be our last topic, and then if we have time left after that, we'll open it up to questions. But people, when they're in their inbox, they don't have a lot of time. You've got 2 seconds to get my attention to get through. Tell me. How are you going to do that? What are your key levers? Roger, we'll start with you.
Okay. Was this our you only have 2 to 3 seconds question, right? Yeah. So to me, it starts a conversation. So introduce a topic that is at least somewhat interesting. Know your audience. Then show some leg. I mean, get them to. You got to incite some interest.
Keep it sexy, Roger.
Not personally. And then tell me what to do. So those 3 things, because this is an ad, it's not a point of sale. You've got to get them to the landing page or the site quickly, but that's what I would suggest.
I think my keywords today has been relevance, so just make it relevant, whatever the topic is. Get short and sweet, to the point at the top of the email. Your subject line gets them in, and then if there is a photo, make sure it needs to be there, I guess, so you're not wasting space with that. And if so, make it relevant.
So I think from testing, you probably know what your readers want, and years ago I was working in the magazine business, and they've got this down pat. You look at the cover lines on a magazine, generally to the show some leg point, sex is always on the cover, so somehow you have to find out what's sexy to your customer, and in our case it happens to be free patterns, but whatever it is, who says people who knit aren't really cool? So I think once you know that, you'll get them in 2 to 3 seconds.
Yeah, I would add that it is that combination of text and imagery, because you really have maybe 3 or 4 words and that juxtaposed with an image in order to get somebody to want to learn more from you and to scroll and to give you those extra 2 or 3 more seconds, or decide whether or not they're going to delete your email. So I think it becomes a huge weight on the copy team, and I will have shout out for copywriters, because they are, I think, Brightwave mentioned too, they are the unsung heroes of email. You really have so few words to make an impact. And so it's important that you are really looking at that copy and you're picking the 5 right words or the 3 right words that are really going to drive someone to want to learn more. And look at different places where you read parts of articles that make you want to click through and read more. Like Yahoo is an incredible copywriting company. They have their little carousel, and I end up reading about things I have no interest in, but I keep getting hooked by their little headlines, and they're just really good at that.
Huffington Post gets me with that stuff too.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you have to think that similar way with your first screen of your email that someone sees. The top 300 pixels are super important.
Well, thanks so much, guys. That said, I'd open it up to the audience. And any questions out there?
Yeah. Hey, Catherine Youngblood from IHG. I have a question for Roger, and maybe not necessarily groundbreaking content, but when disaster hits your brand, I'd love to know. Sorry.
Somebody had.
I know. Please don't hate me. It could hit us. It could hit anybody in this room. I'd love to understand a little bit more about what you did using the channel to communicate to your loyal members and affected members or people, yada yada.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. So, looking at your audience and saying, well, we already knew by pretty intense segmentation, like who was the most engaged and how what we call our prospects versus our cruise rookies would respond anyway. So it was looking at them and then easing back into a regular email cadence. So kind of like taking the foot off the gas pedal for a while. That also allowed us to, if there were things like the PR announcements that came out, or then we had a video from our CEO, it allowed some time, some breathing space so we could deploy those emails. And then the interesting thing was, after we allowed that breathing space, then we eased our way back into the sales messaging. But we're a little bit more, I guess, conversational about it. And that netted us really amazing engagement rates. So I think it was a combination. It was allow that topic to be addressed and kind of ease or scale back on the sale messaging, and then ease back into it, but sort of change the messaging slightly, if that makes sense. But yeah, we saw the conversion didn't fall off. In fact, it increased, and then our engagement as well. There was some nice lifts there.
All right, another question.
Hi, Ailey Ashray with Reg Ready. Content production now is becoming more and more of an issue, and I know you guys touched on it. I mean, you have all these different channels, you're developing content all across the line. How are you guys budgeting that right now in terms of the percentage of the actual overall email marketing budget? Because it's like you have to continually produce and produce. So I'm kind of curious what kind of resources now are really being dedicated to content production.
So at Lion Brand, we do a lot of, the people who work on my team are knitters and crocheters, and they produce a lot of the content. But we also look out there for people who are famous in our industry, and there are actually some people who are expert teachers. There's someone who is an amazing humorous writer who does illustration. And we hire them, and it's not terribly expensive because we're saying to them, you're going to get exposure on a newsletter that goes out to 1 million people, and it's going to build your brand, and someone's actually gotten a book contract from being on our newsletter. So without spending a fortune, but getting really incredible original content. We're going out to people who can do this. There's actually a syndicated comic strip that customizes, it's called Lola, and it's kind of this feisty little old lady, and not that we want to perpetuate that image for knitters, but she, the comic strip writer actually customizes a strip for us once a month, and there isn't like millions of dollars in comic strip writing for newspapers anymore, so it's a good opportunity for him, as is for some of the other people who are celebrities in our field. So we get some pretty extraordinary content that way without spending a lot.
And we actually found efficiencies in, I think I mentioned before, bringing the creative in-house, but also benefiting from what the brand was doing as a whole. And so this year, our budget is lower, but we're producing a whole lot more. So it's kind of a little bit of hand-holding with what they're doing in print and display and across other channels that may have their own creative resources as well, but it's sort of like getting in a room and all of those creative minds thinking together and finding efficiencies too.
And I would add that at the Clymb we're very much a creative-driven company, particularly for an e-tailer. Half of the marketing team either produces images or writes copy, and then about 5% of our overall marketing budget goes to external content for our blog. Because we're a closed, our site is closed off our firewall, we have troubles with SEO, so it's very important to have a content strategy for us to get organic traffic to the site, and we invest in external writers for our blog.
I think it's kind of important to note that marketing has changed, and marketers need to be more creative people. When I hire someone who can use Photoshop, who can edit videos, who can write. So it's sort of changed the way we hire in our department over the last few years, because marketing is so much more about creating creative content.
Perfect. I think that's a wrap. Good way to wrap it up.
Thanks.
So thank you, panelists. Let's go ahead and give our final panel a big round of applause. You guys can jump down. We're actually going to run into to our round tables.